Oh, we nearly had the video twice there. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World. I'm your host, Kane Sims. Got a little bit of a cold. I was at the Beers and Bots event last week. I thought I'd come down with COVID afterwards. Turns out, hopefully, it's just a bit of a cold. So I've been dosing myself up on Lemsips as of late. But I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling all right. This time of day is usually pretty good. It's the mornings that are the problem. So good job that my guests today are hospitable enough to join me at a sensible hour in the UK. So it's very close now. It's getting very close to the European Chatbot Summit in Edinburgh. It's going to be March the 15th and 16th. VUX World has a stage and a track running on the 16th of March, presented by Kore.ai. And we are going to be diving into all kinds of practical lessons for implementing conversational AI in enterprises. We've got Vodafone talking about their journey with Toby. We have Kore.ai are bringing Roche. They've got a very interesting use case helping people use medical equipment using conversational AI and troubleshooting. We've got Love Holidays. We have Total Jobs Group, Stepstone. We've got LNAR, Decathlon, whole bunch of really, really great brands discussing their learnings and their journey in automating customer experience and transforming customer experience using conversational AI. If you want to attend, there is still tickets left. You can use the promo code VUXEU23 to save 30% on your tickets. And all you need to do is go to theeuropeanchatbot.com. That is theeuropeanchatbot.com. Promo code VUXEU23 to save 30% on your ticket. You can't say fairer than that, especially if you can't pronounce your T's or your H's. Now, joining me today is two incredibly experienced guys, Dave Schreffler, who is the SVP of Financial Services and Sales at Kore.ai, and Peter Berbee, who is the SVP of Financial Services Product at Kore.ai, the two people responsible for the FSI arm, I say arm or leg, whichever side of the business it is, at Kore.ai. And gents, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, King. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. Appreciate it. I appreciate your time. Two very experienced people in this industry, so I'm always excited to speak to you. Always excited to learn, and interesting. I look forward to this conversation because on the podcast in the past, I don't know whether we've actually focused specifically on a certain type of industry before. We've had healthcare companies on, we've had, telcos on and stuff like that, but we've really just been discussing the practical or the implication or the kind of value of the technology, not necessarily looking at a sector as a whole and saying, where are the opportunities? Where are people having success? What's the value? What are the real business drivers? So I'm excited to get into it. But maybe to set the scene, Peter, maybe we'll start with you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your kind of background and what you do at Kore.ai?
Sure. So at Kore, I manage our product management for financial services. So my team is designing the conversations and creating the assistance to help in different financial industries. My background, I was at Bank of America for over 16 years, working in the digital kind of area, built out online banking, as well as online or mobile banking for Bank of America. And then I was at Citibank for 6 years, working international, again, in the digital space, building out a wealth management platform in Asia for wealth customers and relationship managers, and then building out a commercial banking, online banking platform.
Interesting. Lots of experience in the financial sector. What led you into conversational AI then? You've worked in lots of kind of seemingly really sort of core technology roles across banking. What was it about conversational AI that brought you across to Kore.ai?
Sure. For me, I think it really was kind of that next step. As I was looking at kind of Alexa taking off, and I was looking at Google Assistant and some of these other kind of voice technologies, and then looking at like the banks just didn't really have anything kind of in this voice space. And so the more I looked into this, it was just a very logical next step for me to take kind of my experience that I've had working in the digital channels and in retail and commercial banking, and then to bring that kind of into solution that was pre-built for banks so that they could easily, turn it on and go.
Nice. Wicked. And we'll get into that, hopefully, as we go through the course of the conversation. David, what about yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you arrived at Kore.ai.
Sure. So, yeah, David Schreffler, and I'm responsible for the sales team that focuses on financial services here at Kore. And I've actually been here since day one. And so, I've seen the evolution, not only of our product, but evolution of the industry and evolution of the acceptance of virtual assistants and conversational AI in financial services and earlier on outside of financial services as well. So, I've had the good fortune to be able to be directly involved with some of our largest deployments, both in financial services and outside of financial services. So hopefully today I can, as appropriate, share some of those stories and experiences. And what led me here? Well, candidly, it was, I've known Raj for a lot of, our CEO and founder, Raj, I've known him for a lot of years. And his vision for what conversational AI could do and be for the industry and specifically financial services. There's just such massive value that the industry can have from this that got me excited and wanted to be part of it.
And do you think that maybe it's a question for both of you? Obviously, David, from when you began at Kore.ai to now, obviously a lot's changed. Do you think that the financial services it seems to me like financial services is like one of the hottest industries for conversational AI? Like, would you say that broadly speaking, the FSI industry has woken up to conversational AI, or am I just seeing that because I'm a huge fan and all I do see is the ones that are working on it?
Yeah. Well, financial services tends to be an early adopter anyway of technology, right? And certainly the larger banks and insurance companies and credit unions and et cetera, they have a lot of technology expertise in-house. And, so that they tend to be on the forefront of a lot of this. But now, not just the largest banks and credit unions and insurance companies, et cetera, but the mid-market banks and the mid-market credit unions and the smaller insurance companies and et cetera, they all are seeing the value of it. And so, there's so many different areas within a bank or within a credit union or candidly, even within collections companies that they can really benefit they definitely clearly see the value.
Do you think, Peter, that is because of the technology becoming more accessible? I mean, you're saying there around I'm assuming you're alluding to Kore.ai's Bank Assist when you're saying that it's very close to just kind of like plug and play sort of thing, pre-configured agents. Is it a technology democracy thing that's leading this adoption, or do you think it's, as David was saying, naturally the financial services industry just gravitates towards this stuff anyway, and so it's kind of bound to happen, sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I do think that COVID really kind of gave it a big kind of nudge. So when COVID hit and all of a sudden people couldn't physically go into branches anymore, the call centers really just started to blow up and they were having a hard time maintaining staff in the call centers. And so, they really had to look at a way to make their call centers much more efficient. And I think naturally, conversational AI is kind of that next generation of IVR that really allows them to kind of automate. And I think that, and that's one of the reasons when we built out Bank Assist, we really focused on, the types of interactions that customers can call in so that we can automate some of those, really to kind of take the pressure off the live agents. And then the other big thing is when you're working with a lot of these smaller banks and medium-sized banks, their customer service is, from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. So, getting them to a much better 24/7 type of service that could answer a lot of their questions was really, a key to really improving the customer experience that the bank customers have with the call centers.
And then actually, Kane, if you don't mind me jumping in on that a little bit too. So far, at least I've been thinking about the automation and the assistance that we can bring to the bank customers or insurance customers or whomever. But there's also a lot of automation and assistance that we provide to the bank employees, and also the call center agents. When Peter was talking about COVID kind of blowing up the call centers, obviously a lot of people, no one could come into the contact centers anymore. And so with the availability of not just bank assist, but then agent assist as well, which is a virtual assistant that is reading the live chat conversation or listening to the live phone call and pre-retrieving for the agent all the answers that they need to service the customer, then there's automation, significant automation and significant help that agent assist brings. And then we also have implementations where the advisors or the bankers or the in-branch employees are using virtual assistants to help them in research and answering questions, performing tasks that they don't routinely do, so they're not real clear on how to do it. So there's all manner of use cases and then not tying it back to what Peter was saying, that especially because of the disruption of COVID, it surfaced a lot of needs where conversational AI could help in every aspect of the bank or insurance company, et cetera.
I remember when Alexa was very popular, and still, although it was popular in certain circles, the conversations that we used to have with potential clients when we were trying to sort of like build Alexa skills and stuff like that, was we were really trying to, or had to, educate them on what Alexa is, why it's so important, why a skill would be important, and kind of the path towards doing it. And it seems as though the awareness in general, but certainly in financial services industry, is probably beyond that now, where there's more awareness. If you, as you were saying, David, the kind of more mid-tier FSI companies are being involved, which means inherently that there's more awareness there. But then, Peter, as you were saying, that a lot of these companies, which is not just the case for FSI companies, it's the case for lots of companies, which is that they're only open from 9 till 5, so they need round-the-clock support. The kind of questions that we used to have to field when we were talking about Alexa was, why do I need Alexa? Why don't I just do this over here instead? Why don't I just do this on my website instead, kind of thing? And so I'm curious about is this the level of conversation that you still have sometimes, which is, why do I need conversational AI when I could have self-service on my website? Or is the market past that conversation now?
Yeah, I don't think they're past that conversation. I mean, if you talk to most banks, maybe the bigger banks have about 80% of their customer base using mobile or online banking. The other 20% still don't use it. So that's still a big chunk of customers who are going to be, calling in on the phones. And so also some of the conversations that we'd have with the banks where, okay, we want to put this in our mobile banking, we want to put this in our online banking, but we only want it to do stuff that isn't available in mobile or online banking. And that then somewhat limits your ability to easily have the same assistant in multiple channels. But, after talking to them about, the benefit of having the same assistant in all your channels, whether it's IVR, SMS, WhatsApp, social media, on your website, to answer both authenticated and unauthenticated questions, because we can log them in, or within their mobile and online banking, having that one central assistant that can answer consistently the same way across all the channels is really important. The other thing, it's really important that your assistant can answer the basic questions as well as the hard ones. If you think about it, when a customer's going to engage, if they want to engage on a daily basis, you've got to make sure that the assistant can also do the stuff they're going to do daily, as well as that's how they learn to trust it. And that's how they know to come to the assistant when they have a more difficult problem that needs solving.
Very good. What about on your side? So yeah, go on, David.
Oh yeah, sorry, Kane. I was just going to add on a little bit more. So Peter actually brought up a really good point around the virtual assistant living in every channel where a customer might interact and being in the channels where they do interact, and there's a lot of recognition now that I'm seeing that wasn't happening maybe a year or two ago, where because the virtual assistant is interacting with the customer in multiple channels, the virtual assistant is able to take the context and the understanding of the interaction in a mobile channel, but then the separate interaction that happened in a web channel, the separate interaction that might have happened when they called into the contact center, and a separate interaction when, when they were in some other channel, and use all of that context in the next interaction or in the current interaction with that particular customer. And allowing the bank and allowing the institution to have a much better understanding of their customer and their what their needs have been and what their needs are, and predict what their next need will be, right? So having that true omni-channel view in relationship with the customer through a single virtual assistant, there's a whole bunch of understanding now that's happening around the value of that.
Absolutely. I do think it's kind of like the more that businesses explore this, the more you start to get to a place where, that front end or front kind of first customer touch point becomes AI mediated, and over time the scope of the use cases it can handle grows, the depth of the conversations that it can have grows, and until you're at a place where you do have a kind of AI mediated front end for most channels basically. And it seems to me that the financial services industry is the most mature in that thinking. I don't know what's going on with Eno, but I know that Capital One had Eno, which was like, the front face of almost all of their channels basically was basically mediated by Eno. Erica had success in 2017 to 2020 with Erica. Presumably that's still doing really well. A lot of them have now, I think, focused probably more on, because that was very much a marketing ploy, which is Eno, Erica, like the kind of like taking advantage of the hype around Alexa and stuff like that. Seems to me though, from what I've from my experience in having conversations with these types of companies, probably specifically in banking, not necessarily the whole FSI industry, but it seems to me as though there's been maturity in that sense, in that now it's not necessarily about the branded personal assistant kind of facade. It's more actually about trying to solve for more kind of like burning use cases, like really important things that they need to do in different channels. Would you concur with that or not?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. You're right. And in the early days, I too saw that a lot of the marketing around various virtual assistants that were out in the marketplace, it was really just that. It was sort of marketing. But when you interacted with that virtual assistant, it was basically deep links, into the website, right? Now those things have matured a little bit, but what I'm seeing is that the institutions want to provide personalized service, contextualized service, with the ability for their customer, if they choose, to never have to contact the call center, right? Never have to interact with a human being. And by the way, increasingly people just don't want to, right? They will if they have to, but that's not the preferred way to get service. Talking with a human being, prefer not. I'd rather interact with a virtual assistant. And so there's a growing recognition that the virtual assistant needs to be able to have sophisticated, very human-like conversations so as to satisfy the needs of the customers. And so delivering real business value is the focus. Marketing hype, I think we're past that.
What do you think, Peter? You were about to chip in as well there.
Yeah, I was going to agree. I think, the banks are really now focusing on trying to create a better customer experience, especially comes to voice. So when you look at things like, customers are able to use their voice to speak to their TV remote, and all of a sudden what they want to watch on Netflix comes up on the screen, or just it's evolved that customers are really more expecting to engage with their voice, and providing the right avenue that lets them do that, is, I think, just going to that next level of customer service, and of customer satisfaction. Even when you think about it, mobile banking is so much faster than like when we would have to go into a branch and do something, right? It's a lot more convenient. But even when you're still in mobile banking, you may have to migrate through 7 or 8 screens to do the one thing you want to do, versus hitting the microphone and talking to the assistant and saying, transfer $200 from my checking to my savings account now, and have it instantly happen for them. I mean, it's that next generation of creating a better customer experience and making things easier to do.
You're speaking my language now, Peter. I used to do a little demo when I used to do a lot of speaking around Alexa, and the scenario that I used to do is I would have a volunteer come up to, if there was a stage, it would be a stage, but it just come up to in front of the audience, and we would both have our phones, and we would have a competition to see who can get directions to the after party or the pub that we were going to afterwards, or whatever it might be, and who can do it faster. And I can't touch my phone. My phone's just on the floor or on the side, and they're allowed to touch their phone. And I would just say, "Hey Siri, give me directions to XYZ," and it would just pop up. And the reason for doing it, 9 times out of 10, it would be faster to do it using Siri. That's when it did understand my accent. And it's just it's to demonstrate that exact value, which is that aside from the inherent friction built into the device, such as a phone, where you need to first of all get it out of your pocket, then you need to unlock it, then you need to start your journey, find the app, then you're in the app. Now all the fun starts, because you need to actually then find out where you need to go to get to whatever you need to get done. It was just a good demonstration of the kind of the way in which a voice interface can just break down those barriers. But it's interesting because I haven't seen necessarily the voice, aside from Eno, Erica, which kind of come out the gate pretty quickly. I haven't seen that many other deployments of the voice interface side of things, which really surprises me because, obviously voice is harder. And even now, for example, I believe that some banks in the UK, certainly, they have a lot of their chatbots buried in the app, and you've got to go to the contact part of the app first, and then the chatbot will come up. It's very specifically a customer service based thing. But what you're describing there, Peter, is really what the true value of a voice interface is, which is, yes, customer service, but also being able to do all kinds of other tasks. I'm wondering where you both see the current state of play from an adoption perspective on that front. Like, we've spoke about how the financial companies are beginning to really focus on high value use cases and solving business problems. But what about using voice in other areas outside of the contact center? Have you noticed this kind of continue to get momentum, or is this something that's going a bit slower than you'd expect?
So I'll
Go ahead, Peter.
jump in. So I think, as more and more people are getting used to, like, instead of texting on their phone, with the keyboard, they're hitting the microphone, right? So they're talking to it, they're getting more used to. And as they're doing this in more places, they're looking for this also kind of within different virtual assistants as well. And so we've designed our web SDK, so there's always a microphone there. We're also experimenting with making the microphone kind of more in the forefront and having the keypad be the optional, just to get because when people actually speak to the assistant, we're able to be more accurate, right? They don't just they don't just say credit card. They say, what's the balance on my credit card? And, I think the chatbot industry has done a really good job of training people just to use short little blurbs, because the chatbots were so bad, they could never kind of do what they wanted anyway. So they were either menu driven or just total keyword driven. So unfortunately, the customers, that's how they've been trained to interact with them. And so now that we truly do have conversational AI that isn't menu driven, it's not, linear in how the conversation has to go. I think that customers, when they do use their voice and engage with it, they're finding that they can say more, and it does help the assistant solve what they're looking for better.
Nice. I know there's a lot more to FSI than banking, and I'd be interested to get in some other areas and other use cases. But first, I've got one quick question just on the banking front. The banking assist. I've seen a number of different examples of these kind of things, not just in banking, but I know Kore.ai's got a number of them. The HR assist and IT assist and stuff like that. The question I had is, from your experience, how cookie cutter are these types of assistants? Like, I could understand that it's highly likely, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just making some assumptions here, but it's highly likely that Kore.ai has got banking customers that have delivered and built banking use cases, and therefore you're able to then create essentially a best of breed model that is able to take the best or the best of all of those use cases, roll it up into one, and so that you have presumably conversational patterns which kind of underpin some of the core use cases, language models that support those use cases, and then again, in theory, all that's really left is integrating into the banking systems in order to push data, pull data in and out of the conversation. Is it as simple as that, or is there? Am I missing something? Is there more to it than that? Because I've never really. I know that these companies have these cookie cutter style assistants, but I haven't necessarily been on the practical side of implementing them.
Well, in fact,
Go ahead.
I'll jump in as the sales guy, and then Peter, you can then add in after I say my little bit. But Peter actually has done a fabulous job. Peter and his team have done a fabulous job in taking our experiences that we've gathered over the years, and then of course Peter's personal experiences and those of the rest of the team, and have built out Bank Assist that has some pre-built 200 things that it does. And but also sort of along with that, providing what we call configuration workbench, where you literally can say, oh, well, of these 200 things, here's 7 that I don't want to do. And so it's merely a configuration setting. And because Bank Assist is built with and runs on top of the Kore.ai XO platform, then it's super easy to say, oh, well, there are 3 things that Bank Assist doesn't do that I want to add in. And so it really is as simple as configuration settings. And then once you have it configured, you have it branded, you have you have it representing the different tasks and things that you want to provide from your bank. Then it really is as simple as connecting it then to whatever your core system and various ecosystem systems are. And we even have pre-built connectors for that. So it really can be as easy as just plug and play and be live in days and weeks, as opposed to months and months and months. So there, Peter, that's my overview. You want to jump in on that?
Sure. So I think, when you look at, so there's a lot of different kind of point solutions out there, right, for the customers to choose from. And when you look at banking, how you pay a credit card bill at bank one versus bank two is pretty much the exact same thing, right? So the actual execution of the flow and the steps that you have to do is pretty standard. But what isn't standard, and I think becomes very important, is the training that's been done up front to be able to recognize all the different ways that a person can request to pay their credit card bill. And what else is not, kind of cookie cutter across a lot of these other solutions is in the middle of, let's say, paying their credit card bill, they're looking for their credit card and they can't find it. And all of a sudden they say, my credit card's lost, right? And the ability for, the assistant to actually be able to pivot and help them with their lost card and then take them right back and finish paying the credit card bill. And so some of these interactions that really make the conversations more realistic, more flowing, rather than just a very linear set of steps, which you'll see in a lot of the point solutions that are out there for banking. I think that's really what makes kind of our platform different and why it stands out. And when you talk to these small guys, the hardest thing for them to consider is hooking up their core banking platform, right? Because their core banking platform is at one of these big providers who will barely give them the time of day to do a project. So the fact that we've already gone in and we've already pre-configured all the APIs, we literally just, have to get a client secret, a client ID, and another piece of information. And then the bank is able to get up and running and start UAT testing. So it truly, I think, has kind of evolved that it's much faster and much easier to get these guys started.
That's really good. I used to do a lot of work in government organizations, and it was exactly the same in principle, which is that the way that fundamentally the things that different companies do are all the same, isn't it? Every single company that makes cars offers the exact same product and service. Do you want to buy a car or not? And then it's the same thing with government. With government, you need to apply for your passport, tax your car, I don't know, report that your street lamp outside is broken, whatever it is, it's all the same. And all government bodies all over the world pretty much do the same kind of thing. What's different sometimes is some of the policies could be different. So, for example, one local kind of organization might say that, if you were to, I don't know, let's say that you were going to arrange for your fridge freezer to be collected, for argument's sake. You're having a refurb, your fridge freezer's outside in the front garden, you want to get it picked up. Some companies would say that, okay, you can have your fridge freezer picked up and it costs this much, but you're not allowed to get anything else picked up with it. Other companies might have a policy which says, okay, we'll pick your fridge freezer up, and also if you've got some dining room chairs that you don't want anymore, put them there as well and we'll collect it as well. Difference in policy sometimes might mean difference in requirements, so to speak. But then what used to happen more than anything else, I'd be curious to see if this is the case in your experience, is one company, purely out of, I suppose, ego or the need to feel as though they are different in some way, would just not want to adopt the same solution purely because of that reason. Like, we had a big program where we tried to standardize all these processes, and different companies would just not take them because they didn't feel as though they'd kind of had ownership over it. and so they wanted to poke around and change things and stuff. I'm not saying that does apply. I'm just curious about your kind of experience. Like, do you find that the banks are happy to take AI bank assist because it solves a problem and the priority is getting the problem solved? Or do they kind of want to put their own little flavor into it and customize it, not necessarily because they have to, but just because they want to feel some sort of ownership sort of thing?
Yeah, so they definitely want to customize it in terms of the responses. So our platform lets them get in, make sure that how the assistant is responding really reflects their tone of voice, right? So this is their brand voice. This is how they would normally speak to their customers. And then, the other conversation that I kind of really have with the banks that kind of got them over this, we need to customize everything, or there's no way that your stuff is going to be able to work because we just do things so differently. So really what the virtual assistant does is it understands what the customer's asking for, and then it gathers information needed to execute, right? But then once we execute, I use the bank's APIs. Their APIs have certain controls within them that, required fields, they've got different checks, really. So when I talk to the banks and when they really want to talk about making a lot of modifications, it's really, we're already using all your existing process. Really what you're changing and have the ability to change is how you want to gather the information from the customer. But because we're leveraging all of their APIs, it's not totally new, right? All the regulatory stuff is already there tied to the APIs. So yes, there's some legal review and certain things that you want to make sure that the responses are in line. But otherwise, it's really not as kind of complicated, I think, as some of these banks start off thinking. And once they understand that, then I think it tends to kind of go a lot faster with them in terms of, yeah, you're right. We just need to focus on the responses and make sure we're comfortable with the conversation.
Nice. That's good, because I think it does solve a big problem, which is, the getting started can be quite difficult, especially when you feel as though you've got a mountain to climb. And I think a lot of especially the mid-tier banks will be thinking that they've got a huge mountain to climb, and which to be honest, they do, because how long has it taken Capital One to build out what they've got? How long has it taken Bank of America to build out what they've got? Millions of dollars. I don't know exactly the price of bank assist for Kore.ai, but I bet you it's not kind of tens and twenties of millions of dollars necessarily, because they've had to invest a lot, for example, in all of the core technologies and stuff like that over the years. But anyway, that's interesting. We've covered a lot about banking. I'm curious to get into some of these other areas, because I know that financial services isn't kind of only banking. And so I'm curious, David, maybe you could share a little bit of information in terms of like what other company types do you kind of consider as being in need of this solution within the FSI sort of industry? Maybe we can get into some use cases and sort of that. But first of all, like when people hear the financial services kind of label, I think they probably just think banking, maybe insurance, but there's a bit more to it.
Right. And right before I jump into that, Kane, I want to add on just a little bit to the concept around, it's not such a heavy lift anymore for a bank or anybody in financial services to be able to have a virtual assistant. But I want to make sure to point out that it's not a heavy lift to have a virtual assistant on your website or in your mobile app, and also that same virtual assistant living in voice channels, so living in your contact center, so you can be live simultaneously or near simultaneously in your mobile app, in your web app, in other digital channels, and in your voice channels, and in your contact center, basically simultaneously, because it is the same virtual assistant. Now the responses are different. You can't, if somebody calls into your contact center, you can't show them pictures over the phone, right? But you certainly have the same intents, the same tasks and capabilities that the virtual assistant can do, irregardless of the channel. It's just the responses are a little bit different. The training is the same. The conversation
What about
are the same.
what about training data though? Is training data identical? Because I'm imagining, like, you know, in a chat channel, you know, Peter was saying earlier on that, like, some people have been trained in chat to be a little bit more kind of short and succinct, whereas voice, they might be a bit more verbose. Text messaging might be slightly different to social messaging or whatever. Like, in your experience, is it the exact same language model you can get away with?
So Peter, you have the real practical experience of multiple implementations on that. So I'll let you answer.
So what we find is that the same training set should be used for all, because it's providing kind of the broadest kind of coverage. So, like, for example, when you're looking at the IVR space, someone still could say credit card, right? And so you still want to be able to handle some of these types of short utterances that you may get in, like, in a chat in the IVR. But it's still kind of that same kind of training set. And now, as we're transitioning to the large language models, we're finding that it really will be even more so kind of that same training set. And it's really your testing and your batch test utterances and things like that tend to vary by channel, but your training typically is consistent and should be consistent across all.
Nice. Very, very well cleared up. Thank you for that. Cool. That makes perfect sense. So the next part of that question then was around helping to clarify what we mean when we say financial services, and what type of companies are kind of you know, have opportunities for this technology, should we say?
Right. Well, of course, we've been talking about banks, and we've been talking about customer service and a little bit about agent assistance. But there's a whole lot of other areas within a bank and lines of business within a bank that virtual assistants can really help out with. So there's, on the lending side, whether it be credit cards or consumer lending or mortgage lending. Obviously, in the collection space, we can really help banks in the collection space. I really will get off banks here in a second, Kane. Certain banks have advisory and wealth management roles within the banks, and so the advisors themselves would be using virtual assistants to help them prepare for portfolio reviews or answer questions for the customers, et cetera. So there's a whole lot of additional help that we can provide banks than just sort of the traditional virtual assistant for retail banking, right? So there's lots of other helps. Now, large credit unions kind of operate like banks, but smaller credit unions operate just a little bit differently. I mean, it's still about having accounts and all that, but I mean, again, it's members that they are helping, and oftentimes they take a little more personal approach, a little more personal relationship. So there are variations within the credit unions around just how banks think about it versus credit unions. But now, kind of leaving the banking and credit union space, certainly insurance companies, P&C insurance companies, health insurance companies, et cetera. We have implementations in I'll focus right now on P&C, where the customer can open up a claim, create their notification of first loss, and everything from create the claim to then provide documentation around it, check on the status of it, and then ultimately receive the reimbursement for it, as well as pay premiums and that sort of thing. So in P&C insurance, there's lots of opportunity for virtual assistants to help the customers of insurance companies.
And what does PNC stand for?
Property and casualty. So auto
Okay.
insurance or home insurance or renter's insurance or something like that, as opposed to health insurance or medical insurance.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
but again, there in health insurance and medical insurance and life insurance, again, it's centered around claims and the account servicing, and so allowing a customer to be able to self-serve as opposed to having to wait for 20 minutes to talk to an agent, or to see what their coverage is, or are they eligible for particular coverage. Those are all very typical kinds of use cases that we see there. There's credit card companies and consumer loans, mortgage lending. Again, all use cases there where servicing the customer can self-service. Now, one of the interesting use cases, and actually in an earlier podcast where you had Raj and Prasanna on that podcast, they talked about a use case where a wealth management firm their financial advisors are using a virtual assistant to be able to get answers from the tens and hundreds of thousands of documents that they have within the firm to get very specific answers, the sentences out of the paragraphs where the answer is, so that they can have the most up-to-date and accurate information when they are answering questions and doing research on behalf of their customers. So that's a very solid use case in wealth management and advisory firms. Collections companies, increasingly we are having success within the collections companies, where both in inbound, where they're wanting to receive payment from their customers and from the debtors, as well as in the outbound, where they need to do right party verification, and then once they identify that, oh, this is the right party, then the virtual assistant can have a conversation with that person around making a payment on their loan, or even negotiating a payment schedule, or even a settlement on it. So increasingly, we're seeing that in the collection side of the house, there's adoption of virtual assistants, candidly because of the cost savings, and look, people don't want to have a conversation with another human being when they're behind on payments. They'd rather not talk to a human about it. And so the adoption of using a virtual assistant we see is really high in collections companies as well. So those are a few. I think there's, I generally think about it as 9, 10, 11 different kinds of companies, but those are sort of the highlights.
Interesting. And I think you're right. Yeah, there's certain use cases where people would definitely feel more comfortable not speaking to a human. There was a really good example of it was actually coming out of India. There was a chatbot that was created that actually was there to help people who are predominantly women who are suffering from domestic abuse. And it was a chatbot, and people found it more kind of like approachable, or people were more comfortable speaking to a chatbot than they were others, actual humans, which is really interesting. The other interesting thing about that actually is that most of their usage came during the middle of the night, when the husband abuser was asleep and they were texting during the night, which is interesting. But yeah, that's definitely the case. What do you think? I'd be interested in getting both of your thoughts on this. Like, we've spent a lot of time talking about banking, and I think that's obvious because the need in banking and the activity in banking is 110% evident, and has been for a number of years. And I think that the work to try and democratize access and usage of this technology through things like bank assistance, so that is absolutely needed. Out of all those other industries and use case types, like if you were to pick one which is either like the most exciting or the biggest untapped opportunity for these kind of companies, like where would you think that is? Maybe Peter will start with you. Any ideas in terms of like where is the is there a gem in those company types and use cases that David was just covering there, where you think it would be an absolute dream to work on more of that?
Yeah, I actually think the collections area is the perfect area for a virtual assistant, because similar to what you were saying about the domestic abuse, right? People are embarrassed if you can't pay your bills and they've kind of gone over. The other thing is collections largely has been in the phone calls, right? You have a phone call, which if you're accepting a phone call, it means that you have to be at a place that you can talk. You've got to be prepared to talk about it. And plus, with all the screening and everything else that's now happening on phones, there's just not a good way, or it's easy to ignore these calls. So now, developing the right virtual assistant that can use SMS, it can send you a message. When you want to respond, you can, right? So it can sit out there for a day, 2 days, 3 days. And when you're ready to respond, you have the ability to respond, and the virtual assistant can then, instantly start kind of interacting kind of right with you. I think when you look at, especially a lot of the companies that are sending stuff out to collections agencies, I think it would allow them to keep some of that longer, because they'd have the ability to automatically be trying to kind of collect on the debt. But I just think there's so much opportunity for a much better experience in terms of collections than, the phone calls that kind of come out today.
What about you, David? What was your sort of like either dream opportunity, or where should which type of industry be focusing more? Do you think where's the golden sort of opportunities for these companies?
Yeah. So I concur with Peter that the collections companies and companies that have collections operations can certainly benefit hugely. But more broadly, and of course we're close to end of time, so I've got to throw in the whole LLM thing. More broadly, because of our ability to integrate not just with OpenAI, but having our own enterprise LLM, and the benefits of having that, meaning that you can have a 95 plus accurate virtual assistant with just 1/10 of the training effort. And in fact, even with using the LLM model, that our enterprise LLM, being able to consume vast amounts of otherwise unconsumable knowledge within an enterprise, and make that knowledge available to the virtual assistant or people who are using the virtual assistant, so that now the use cases and it used to be that, the long tail kind of use cases we just can't service, and the super hard knowledge, hard to find knowledge and hard to suss out the answer, we just can't expose that through a virtual assistant. Well, now you can. And so, I believe that especially with our approach around using large language models, it's going to allow all of our customers to just completely be able to fulfill all the requests that would come in through a virtual assistant, with little to no effort in training and maintaining the accuracy of that virtual assistant across all those even long tail use cases. So that's what I'm excited about.
Nice. Me too. I concur with that, absolutely. It's a very interesting area. I think definitely the collections. I would concur with that as well. That there's some real good opportunities there. Banking is a no-brainer. Insurance, I think we didn't touch on insurance a great deal, but I think there's lots of interesting use cases with insurance. There's a company actually called Peppercorn, which only is a chatbot. In the same way as Lemonade, I'm sure you're familiar with Lemonade in the US, that began as a text messaging service. You could take out insurance purely over SMS. A company called Peppercorn in the UK is trying to do something similar, where it's only available as a chat interface and only via the comparison websites, which is really interesting because typically the insurers didn't like the comparison websites. And then they had to play ball with them because they have no choice. Whereas now here's a company which is only exclusively available via a comparison website and is conversation first. And so I think insurance is also an untapped area that I think we'll see a lot more activity from.
Yeah, I think also on the insurance side, you have really kind of two audiences. You've got policyholders, and then you've got the agents and the brokers who are selling the insurance. And so having, possibly two separate, assistants, one that's servicing the brokers, that's telling them, which clients are coming up for renewal, what's the status of claims for a certain client, being able to automate all of these types of things, being able to do exactly what you just said and compare, because these brokers work with multiple agencies. So being able to compare across so that they can then present back to the potential policyholder, here's the best, homeowners that I could find for you, et cetera. I think there's a lot there to kind of help more of the employees in the industry, like the agents and the brokers, as well as the end users, the policyholders.
Absolutely. Wicked. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure, gents. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been definitely interesting. I knew it would be interesting, but it's been really good to just really focus on one specific type of kind of industry and really kind of climb into not necessarily the kind of the practicalities in terms of how do you design a conversation for this and implement this. It's been interesting just to explore the landscape really and get your thoughts on where the value is, where the opportunities are, the reasons why people should be, and also just general trends and kind of your perspectives on the industry has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Real pleasure for us.
And for those who are interested, you can visit Kore.ai to learn more. That is Kore.ai. And there, I'm sure you'll be able to find more about Bank Assist, which we've been talking a lot about. You can actually register for a completely free account and try the platform that way. And it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me, and thanks for tuning in. If you haven't got your tickets to Edinburgh yet, please do that. It is theeuropeanchatbot.com. Promo code VUX EU23 to save 30%, and hopefully we'll see you in Edinburgh next month. Thank you again, Peter. Thank you again, David. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.